It took one person. It took one person modeling what it looked like to be vulnerable. And I can think about all of these different situations and friendships and different groups of friends that I've been part of, and even just one-on-one friendships that I've had where just being vulnerable and letting my guard down has paved the way for true and rich friendship and community. Hey, my name is Sarah Short, and I'm a busy mom of 5 kids, and after almost 2 decades of parenting, I'm here to share with you everything I've learned from my triumphs and successes and from my biggest mistakes. Think of me as the mom who's been where you are, remembers how hard, hilarious, and exhausting your days are, and wants to help you navigate your days as a mom with courage and intention, all while fostering amazing relationships with your kids and a home life you love. My Nana once told me, there's no way but through. Turns out she was right, in life and in motherhood. So throw in some headphones and come laugh and cry with me as we talk about all things mom. This is the No Way But Through podcast. Welcome back to the No Way But Through podcast. I am so glad to be back again with you guys today and so excited about today's episode. Before we get into that, I just want to give a shout out to the people who financially support my podcast every month. It's such a gift, and I'm really grateful. If you would like to support this podcast, there's always a link in the description of each episode at the bottom, and I would love to have you as one of my monthly supporters. I don't get paid anything for producing and recording this podcast every week, and so whenever you contribute financially to me in this podcast, it enables me to do things like get equipment that I might need and to continue to make this podcast better week after week and continue to reach people in doing what I'm doing. Today's episode is a really fun one for me. I knew as soon as I finished watching the documentary that we're going to talk about today that I was going to record a podcast episode on it, because I was so impacted by what I watched and some of the things that I saw that I knew there were just some really profound things and profound meaning behind some of it. And I didn't want to miss it, and I wanted to share it with you all. The other thing I love about this episode is that this is just a quintessential Sarah Short episode. I'm recording this because I want to, because I love what it's about. I loved the 80s. I still love the 80s. I grew up in the 80s and was a kid of the 80s. And so when this documentary dropped and I first heard about it, I couldn't wait to sit down and watch it. And then a couple of really good friends watched it and said, oh my gosh, you guys have to watch this. You are going to love it. And so Jason and I sat down and watched it one night, and it brought back so many memories of being a kid in the 80s and learning to love pop music and all of these artists that I looked up to and listened to their songs over and over again. I still know the words by heart, and I still listen to them today. I also really love this episode because all of my peers and my good friends are kids of the 80s too. So they know all of these songs and they know all of these artists. And while most of my podcasts are geared very specifically towards younger moms, I know that there are things that anybody can gain from listening. But I know that this episode is going to be especially fun and very interesting for my real life friends and peers. All of us who were kids in the 80s and pressing record and play at the same time on our boom boxes so that we could record the songs of these artists on tape and be able to listen to them whenever we wanted to. My kids don't have any idea about this whole concept of not being able to listen to a song on demand when you want to listen to it as many times as you want to listen to it. And that was the struggle of our lives in the 80s, right? I remember sitting in my room on my bed and waiting for Girls Just Want to Have Fun by Cindi Lauper to come on the radio because I wanted to record it. And I basically just banished myself to my room until that song played on the radio. And I would jump over my bed, hit play and record it on tape so that I could listen to it and dance around my room to it whenever I wanted to. But even more than this documentary taking me straight back to the 80s and right back to being a kid that was just so into pop music, There are some really profound things that this one night, when all of these artists came together to record this song for a good cause, brought out. And as I kept thinking about it over the next few days after I watched it, 3 things that happened on that night were such an incredible picture of friendship and community, and really have some good lessons for us as it relates to our own lives and being in community with people and living life with them. So if you want to pause this podcast now and go watch the documentary and then come back, then you'll know more in detail what I'm talking about. Of course, since I'm sitting here recording a podcast about it, I absolutely recommend it to you and would love for y'all to see it and watch it. Just a little disclaimer. It's PG-13 for some bad language, but it's pretty minor. And for any of you old enough to listen to a podcast, including teenagers, it shouldn't be an issue. But you don't have to have watched the documentary to really gain from what I want to talk to you about today. Fun fact, the most popular episode, the most listened to episode on this No Way But Through podcast is episode 3 on friendship. 4 ways to know someone is for you. I get messages every week from listeners who are just finding that episode or someone sent it to them to listen to. And so I know that the topic of friendship and community is really important to y'all. I mean, it's definitely important to me. There are few things in life I want to get better at than being a good friend, and to continue learning how to love people well and learning from my mistakes and when I haven't done things well, and then learning from the people in my life who are amazing friends to me and to others. So let me give you a little bit of a backstory on the documentary, and then I want to share with you these 3 things I think this documentary highlights and has to teach us about friendship and community. And these things, they're unlikely things. I don't think that the creators of the documentary wanted to really teach us this, but I just couldn't miss them as I sat and watched this documentary, and that's why I want to sit down and share them with you today. The documentary is called The Greatest Night in Pop. In January 1985, some of the biggest pop stars in the world, I would say the biggest pop stars in the world, came together to record a single called We Are the World. It was a charity single where all of the funds raised from the single would go to African famine relief. When I tell you it featured the biggest pop stars in the world, it did. Michael Jackson, Lionel Richie, Stevie Wonder, Ray Charles, Bruce Springsteen, Bob Dylan, Cindi Lauper, Billy Joel, Diana Ross, Tina Turner. These were the biggest pop stars at the time, and they were all going to be in Los Angeles for the American Music Awards. And after that show, they all secretly went to a recording studio, and overnight, they recorded We Are the World. There were video cameras rolling, so the documentary has a video of a lot of the behind the scenes of everybody getting together to make the single, everybody arriving, all the logistics that were required and the challenges that they faced in getting all of these megastars into one room for one evening. And it's really fascinating how Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie, who wrote the song, all of the background behind how that came together. You'll have to watch the documentary if you want to hear and watch all of that detail. It's all so incredibly fascinating. But essentially, they all came together after the American Music Awards that night into a studio, and they recorded We Are the World. I'm sure you can imagine having almost 50 of the world's biggest stars in one room, that there were some interesting dynamics. They weren't allowed to bring any of their assistants or anything like that. It was only allowed to be them that came to the room that night. So it was just the stars with then the producers and the cameramen, and that's it. Those were the only people in the studio. Quincy Jones, one of the most insanely talented record producers of all time, was the genius behind making it happen. And the way all of it unfolds it's like truly mind-blowing. So you have all of the world's biggest pop stars in one room getting ready to record a song together. And if you haven't heard We Are the World, many of those pop stars, they have basically one line, like a one-line solo throughout the whole song, or even just a half of a line. So basically, the song is a bunch of them recording half a line or a whole line, each with their distinctive voice and their distinctive personality, and then it's all put together into one song. And so you have Michael Jackson's voice, and then you have Cindi Lauper's voice, and then Bob Dylan, and then Bruce Springsteen, and then Billy Joel, and Tina Turner, and Diana Ross, just some of the most incredible artists. And each of them get a line or a line and a half, something like that. And then it's all put together into this incredible song. I know every word of it because I listened to it hundreds of times as a kid because all of us were completely obsessed with We Are the World in the mid-'80s. So that's basically the backstory, and you'll have to watch the documentary and watch it all unfold. But there's 3 things that I want to point out to you that this documentary teaches us about community and friendship, because I think they're so valuable, and these unlikely nuggets that if we stop and we think about these things as we're living out life with people around us, I think they can truly make us better friends and help us to really love the people better around us that God's given us to love. That's why I'm recording this episode, and that's what I want to share with you now. So let's get right into it. 3 unlikely things the We Are the World documentary teaches us about friendship and community. Number 1, check your ego at the door. When Quincy Jones was getting ready for everyone to come record the single after the American Music Awards, he was setting up at the studio during the awards and getting ready for everyone to arrive. While he was doing this, he made a sign, and he put a sign on the door, just a handwritten sign. The sign simply said, check your ego at the door. Like I mentioned, we're talking about the wealthiest, most famous people in the world that were coming together to record this single. And they were all going to be walking in the door solo that night into the studio with each other. What did Quincy Jones fear? Why was the sign necessary? What did he know could get in the way of these people being able to come together and do this well? What could destroy the single? What could make it absolutely not work and derail the entire thing? Egos. As I was thinking about this as it relates to our friendships and living out life in community with other people, checking your ego at the door when you walk into any room, any restaurant, any gathering at all, it would serve all of us so well if we could check our egos at the door. I was thinking about this as it pertains to my own life in my own different groups and friendships. And I have, on occasion throughout the year, a bunch of my friends, we will get together. I have one particular group of friends, and a lot of us are bigger personalities, and a lot of us are doing really valuable work. We're moms, some of us are entrepreneurs, some are in ministry, some are just in business people, successful, and they are awesome people. They're some of my favorite friends. But y'all, when we get together, there's just a lot of big personalities, and sometimes different ones of us will remark, all of us, even in the group together, that there's just a lot of big personalities here, right? You guys can probably think about that in your own lives, in your different spaces where you come together with friends, and you all have a lot of different opinions about things. You have a lot of different ways that people are doing things. And I was just thinking how powerful it is when we come together in community, when we don't allow our egos to be easily bruised, when we're instead really good listeners and humble and allow our friends and the people around us to challenge us and to make us better, and for us to lift up and value the people around us instead of feeling like we need that ourselves. We need others to do that and be that for us. I know for me, when I enter a room or I go into a party or I go into a situation when I'm gathered together with people, I can sometimes want to put on this thicker skin and this facade that says, hey, I have all of my stuff together. I have it together. I'm doing well, and I want you to respect me. I want you to like me. And sometimes that can feel like an armor, and I don't want anybody to ding it, right? But y'all, I don't want to be so easily offended. I don't want to get my panties all in a wad, which is what my Nana used to always say, and get my ego easily bruised because of what someone says or something someone says and I don't like the way it sounded and that irritates me. Or maybe that challenges the way I'm doing things in some way, and allowing envy or hearing about the successes of one of my other friends or peers in my community to get on my nerves or to somehow annoy me, and having that ding my armor and irritate my ego. Checking our egos at the door when we walk into any room, any restaurant, sit at any table, walk into church, walk into any conversation. Checking our egos at the door allows us to be gracious. It allows us to lift other people up instead of needing that ourselves. I don't want to be at a table with my friends and need someone to massage my ego. There's a lesson here for all of us. What if we walk into a room with friends and live in community with people, and we remind ourselves of that? How would that change us? How would that change the way we see what we need from other people? What if this allows us to better embrace humility and focus on cheering for others because our ego isn't welcome? And we can then love the people in our lives, the people right in front of us, around the table, in the room, so much better. Check your ego at the door. What good advice for all of us. Number 2, when one person is vulnerable, people will follow. There's this incredible moment in the documentary when all these artists have been in this recording studio for hours, and it's getting really late. We're talking like the wee hours of the morning now. And there are like 60 people in this room trying to record all of these different sections of this song, the chorus and the background vocals. And one of the craziest things about this documentary is that these people, these artists, had only gotten this song, they'd only gotten the tape of it a couple of days before. And so a lot of the stuff, a lot of the details are being worked out overnight while they're all inside the studio together. I mean, it is just wild, y'all. So they're all standing around, sheet music in hand, trying to hash out all of these different parts of this song and get it recorded and produced. And Diana Ross, who is an absolute legend and one of the best singers to ever come out of Motown. She was the lead singer of the Supremes and just went on to record some of the best, most amazing songs ever. She walks up to Daryl Hall, who was part of the duo Hall & Oates, another incredibly successful group from the 80s, and says to him, "I'm your biggest fan. Would you sign my music?" Y'all, this is one of the world's best singers from one of the world's most successful female groups, now an incredibly successful solo artist, going up to a guy who looks nothing like her, who is in a completely different genre, a different race, just the most unlikely two people to be fans of one another, maybe in the entire room. And Diana Ross walks up to Daryl Hall and asks him to sign her sheet music. What happens after this is that everyone then begins to pass their music around to each other and laughing together and signing one another's music like they're all each other's biggest fans. And you can tell they are. You see them hugging and laughing and signing music. And y'all, there was so much tension in that room from trying to get this song recorded in this one night. And it took one person. It only took one person, Diana Ross, to be vulnerable and walk up to Daryl Hall to get it all started. It's one of the most moving parts of the documentary. And I sat there watching it and it just blew my mind because I was like, yes, this is it. It takes one person who had checked their ego at the door to go over to someone else and say, I'm such a huge fan. I love what you do. I love your music. Will you sign this for me? This immediately took me to a scenario that I had with some of my girlfriends a few years ago. I have a group of girlfriends that I really deeply love. And we sort of formed into this group kind of unexpectedly. We have a friend who is just one of us who is just, we all tell her all the time that she's just this amazing gatherer of people. And she kind of pulled us all together and we just became this group of friends and we're still friends today. And yet back then, there was maybe some tension and we all didn't know each other equally well. Some of us were really close with each other and some were close in different pockets. And we all hadn't ever really hung out together. And just very frankly, I think there was some uncertainty and some fear. I don't know that any of us really wanted to come together and be vulnerable with each other. I know I didn't. I felt like I needed to protect myself because I didn't know everybody equally well. And I felt very safe with some of the girls in this group, but I didn't necessarily feel safe with others. My friend, who was the one who initially sort of pulled our group together, she got us all together in this very intentional way. And in not so many words said, we're going to come together and we're going to be vulnerable with one another. She provided for us all an opportunity to check our ego at the door and come in and lift one another up and share our struggles with each other in this very vulnerable way. And you know what? It changed us. Walls came down. Friendships that had only been acquaintances before became real, actual friendships. That's what happened in my own life, in my experience with this. I am now actual, real friends with all of the women in this group. And I can say that because my other friend, my one friend who brought us all together, modeled this for us, modeled vulnerability, and it snowballed. I will never forget what happened in that room and with those women. And I'm so grateful for my still growing friendships with them today. It took one person. It took one person modeling what it looked like to be vulnerable. And I can think about all of these different situations and friendships and different groups of friends that I've been part of, and even just one-on-one friendships that I've had where just being vulnerable and letting my guard down has paved the way for true and rich friendship and community. I want to be the kind of friend that's brave to be vulnerable first. I want to be like Diana Ross. Lord have mercy if I could have her singing voice, but I want to be like Diana Ross, who's one of the most famous artists in the world and has every reason in the world to have an ego and walks up to, I would say, a less famous artist and says, "Can you sign my sheet music? I'm such a huge fan." Gosh, what this could do for our friendships. What doors this could open for real and intimate community for us if we say, I'll go first. I'll be the Diana Ross here, even if I have 1,000 reasons in my own mind to bring my ego into this situation and into this friendship. I'm going to let the other person know how much I think of them, how awesome I think they are, and then watch what it does. I want that for me. And y'all, I want that for you. I want that for our relationships, and I want that for our friendships. Number 3, our differences make us better. The most stunning thing about the We Are the World single is the uniqueness of the different voices in it. I told y'all I'm a kid of the 80s and I loved pop music when I was a kid. And I remember when I first heard this song and started listening to it, that one of my favorite things to do was that I could identify every single one of the singers in it just by the uniqueness of their voice. Y'all, there is no confusing Michael Jackson with Bob Dylan. There's no confusing Bruce Springsteen with Cindi Lauper, Huey Lewis with Smokey Robinson, or Ray Charles with Tina Turner. There just isn't. I know exactly what all of their voices sound like because I've listened to their music. And as you listen to the single, We Are the World, each one of these different stars has just half a line or a line, but you know exactly who they are. And they come together and they make this single. And it's just so incredible the way it all comes together. And what makes it so good is that their voices are so unique and different. It's really interesting. One of the things that they told each of the singers when they signed on to this project, they told them, we want your sound, your style, your key. Lionel Richie says in the documentary, we were looking for differences, contrast. And then as they were mapping it out, who's going to sing what line next to whom and what lines will be next to one another, it's the contrast of the different people's voices that's so stark and that makes the single so stunning. So they put people juxtaposition to others whose voices sounded completely different to theirs. They put Bob Dylan next to Ray Charles, and they put Stevie Wonder next to Bruce Springsteen. Y'all, when we come together, our differences make us better. It can be so tempting when you're building a life and community with people around you and making friends, to feel like you all need to be the same in order for it to work. Do you feel like you need to make the same choices and have the same values and have the same priorities and the same faith and go to the same schools and the same church and make the same parenting choices with everyone around you? Nothing could be further from the truth. We need each other's differences. We need the uniqueness of each one of us, that when we come together in friendship, one-on-one, or we're in a group of friends, we need the uniqueness that makes us all who we are, and we all bring different things to the table. We all have our unique sound. We all have our unique style. We all have our unique key. And when we come together, it can be this incredibly beautiful picture that our collective differences, they make us better. And one of the things that's so incredible when that happens is that we're not only a reflection of what really good community looks like when we come together in our differences like that, in our uniquenesses, but we're actually then a reflection of the true kingdom of God. He intentionally didn't make any of us the same. He didn't make our kids the same as us as parents. Not only did he make all of our fingerprints different, but he made all of us different completely, fully, and incredibly in our uniqueness. And he loves all of us. He never wanted us to all be the same. What would it do to our friendships and our community if we could recognize that more? If we could set aside the idea that we only need to be in community with people who are like us, but embrace this beautiful picture of being in community, having friendships with, and celebrating our differences. So much beauty can be born out of that. This single, We Are the World, it is the 9th best-selling single of all time. It was certified quadruple platinum, becoming the first single to be certified multiple platinum, and it was the fastest-selling U.S. pop single in history. Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie, they wrote an incredible song. But it was the coming together of all those musicians, the most famous musical artists in the world in the 1980s, that made it great. They had one night They had only one night to get it right and to come together and do this. There was no way, as they talk about in the documentary, there was no way they were going to be able to get all those musicians together at any other time than after the American Music Awards on January 28th, 1985. But do you know what we get? We get to do this over and over inside community and inside our relationships and friendships. Coming together in rooms and around tables, in church buildings and schools and pools and soccer fields, and allow our differences to make us better. We don't have to get it right the first time. We don't have to get it right in one night. There's no such thing as a perfect friend, but we get to keep trying, coming together, checking our egos at the door, being vulnerable and watching that snowball, and celebrating the uniqueness and individuality of each of us that then makes our collective extraordinary. I hope I've convinced you to go watch The Greatest Night in Pop. If you haven't yet, that's the name of the documentary, and it's on Netflix. And for those of you that have, I'd love to hear from you and hear your thoughts on it, because there are few things I love talking about more than 1980s music. We've gotten our kids around here, we've gotten our kids into 80s music, and a lot of times on road trips or around our house, 80s music is blaring from the speakers everywhere, and I wouldn't have it any other way. It's one of the things I am most proud of as a parent. My kids love 80s music, and I am so pumped about that. At one point in the documentary, Lionel Richie says that people would ask, why does he or she have that part? Why does she get to do that line? Because, it's hard to check your whole ego at the door when you are regularly surrounded by people who will do anything for you, right? He said that he would just simply respond because it fits their range. Simple. It fits their range. God has ranges for all of us. Different assignments, different gifts. You have shoes that only you can fill. You have uniqueness that's just yours. That's how God made us and how He made our world better, because He made us all different and we all bring different things to the table. Maybe you'll watch this documentary, We Are the World, and it'll give you some things to think about too, like it's given me. What if we better embrace humility and focus on cheering for others because our ego isn't welcome, and we can then love the people in our lives that are different from us so much better? I hope I've encouraged you today that inside your own friendships, inside your relationships, and inside your communities of people, to be distinctively you. Be vulnerable, lead the way with that, and check your ego at the door. Thanks a million, We Are the World. You're the best. See y'all next time. You've just listened to another episode of the No Way But Through podcast. If you want to connect with other like-minded moms and join our growing online community, head on over to Instagram and follow along with us at No Way But Through. You can always reach me over there throughout the week. And if you'd like to financially support this podcast, there's a link at the bottom of every episode where you can do just that.